And we still had these police and fire positions out there that were lingering. And we had some of the administrative recommendations that were lingering that we wanted to make sure that we, once we knew we had a balanced budget, how can we get to the point where we can include those? So the bulk of the work of Lee and I since then has been trying to sort through those things. And the slides, until he gets them up, these slides that should be in your pile, if you open up to page 2 on those, you'll see kind of where we were at, where we landed. You have the information on your desk, we just don't have it on the screen yet. And she's handing out the new community agency. Collect the old one, Lee, so that there's no confusion. Getting there. So coming back to, so the far right column on this sheet that she just handed you, that will be what is in the budget, in the detail sheets that we printed. And I can go to the page number if you want to see how those interlace into the actual budget sheets on the left. Understanding that the ones that are in here now are about $4,000 more than what's on this sheet. We will fix this to match the sheets that we just did, okay? That said, we went back through the budget since the last meeting with getting those positions funded in mind. How do we get to that number? And so frankly, on the very page 2 of the detail sheet is the general fund revenue. The occupational license, which, we had talked about, are we being too conservative with that or not? It's not on the screen, but it's on page 2 of your detail sheets here. It's near the top. It was, into the year we're in is projected to be 10.7. We're still not, we would love not to have to estimate that high because we don't, that number can go up or down. And I feel like if we get to that 10.7, that removes the conservative room that you have left in your revenue projections, really. And so we did move much closer to that in order to start towards funding these 3 positions. We ended up at 10.65, which is just under that number. I know it's not significantly under, and it's very close, but we're not quite there. There is some room on it still. It's about the 4th or 5th line on that sheet 2 of your budget detail. I want to make sure y'all see that. So we added about $100,000 in revenue from the last meeting there, just strictly moving it closer to where we're ending up this year. So we had estimated a slight decline in occupational taxes. We reduced the amount of that decline that we predicted. Does that make sense? Without messing with the rate. Yeah, there's no rate. It's purely collections, what we think we'll collect. We always try to be conservative with that particular number. But, we don't necessarily see it regressing necessarily. There's not a history of that, but I think a flat year would be conservative, and so we're just under flat, so I still feel better about that we got to there. So we did cut some expenses also. We trimmed some overtime expenses in the police and fire, and I'm not going to try to compare those. You know how many cost line items there are. So we went through our costs again and tried to clean that up. And so we ended up on the right side of the column. So the left side first, the revenue went up that $100,000 that we just pointed out, and then we've cut another $100,000 in expenses as we could. And I really feel like, to be fair, I'm not real comfortable cutting a lot more expenses out in terms of budgeting purposes. Yeah, it might be possible to come in with communications under 1.463, but in terms of projecting what we'll spend, I think you want to be conservative both ways, and you want to give yourself a chance. So that's a pretty narrow budget on expenses based on where we're ending up this year. We're really not increasing those expenses very much other than in the personnel cost, which is on the left, you can see the payroll adjustment, which is your experience step plus 3.4% COLA. And so that first bullet is the majority of your expense increase from last year. So when we add those two numbers up, you can see we end up with a budget surplus of $25,000. What we did with that is this. So remember last time you all asked the question about, does this include the administrative recommendations that some of your department heads were making? So Randy and I, we weren't really done analyzing what that did to us when we went through some of the projected turnover, perhaps, where you're going to have some people retire, for example, or some vacancies. You're going to have some short-term vacancies. We feel like that those three main reorganization bullets will only net about a $15,000 increase. And so we're not adjusting our payroll cost to cover that necessarily. We believe we'll cover that with just the natural progression of the budget implementation. We believe we'll have somebody retire in utilities. We believe we'll have turnover in the general fund. So I think we'll be able to, I don't want to increase the budget just to cover that, because I think we'll be covering it just in the natural progression of the budget. Does that make sense? So then the next step was the staffing of the vacant positions. I appreciate the chief's support in trying to figure out how to implement those officer positions. So we have two police positions that we wanted to refund and one fire position we wanted to refund. Remember the mid-year adjustments, we left those vacant to the end of the fiscal year. So dealing with the first police officer, they want to hire a certified officer. They believe that if they advertise that in the end of July, then that person would probably come on board the first week of August. So therefore, a full cost of a certified is $124,411. So we think we will include $93,308, which is 3/4 of that expense in the fiscal year you're going into. That funds that position, so that means in August or in mid-July, late July, they'll advertise for that police officer position back. The fire recruit, there is a slot in the academy in August for a trainee position. So we want to try to make that, which means we'll have 11 out of the 12 months that requires funding for that position. And so we will include 93,042 for that position for the rest of the year. And then the other police officer recruit, in talking to the chiefs, you're going to get the first certified officer hired. January, you'll start looking at your trainee position for a trip to the academy in the spring. So because of that, we think we'll only end up with about 1/3 of that expense in the budget this year. Donna, you're asking questions. Does that make sense? I want to make sure I don't.
No. I was just asking him. I thought we had asked to add 2 police and 2 fire, just what it would look like. And then does this include, I see up here the senior telecommunicator.
It does not include a new hire in 911.
No. Does it include the realignment in the police department with the captain sergeant money? Because we heard that again on our tour, how they need that.
The captain, yes, that's really becomes cost neutral.
Right.
By the time you shift all the way through it, and by the time you do get one turnover of a position, that's easily absorbable. these are just the three big things that actually resulted in maybe an increase. Particularly, for example, the utility clerk position, that is an increase in those pays. Does that make sense? The others are really inside of the department as it turns over with vacancy.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that that's covered, because it's not on here.
I did not list it on the screen,
So I
correct?
just want to make
Yeah.
sure, and then, on the fire, I think we all had asked what it would look like. I don't know.
So if you want to add another fire recruit, that's another $100,000. We didn't do that because we didn't think we could get there in good faith. With the current numbers that we're looking at, unless you want to address revenue. Those three positions are what we could fund with the surplus that we came up with. So we came up with $325,000. When we went through that scenario on the left side, we had $219,000 in increased expenses. And so then of that $225,000 on the right side, you end up with a $5,000 unallocated budget surplus in that scenario.
Earl, I know we're getting to it later on, but our fund balance requirement's 25%, just
Yeah, I've got a
internally.
slide on that if you,
Okay.
yeah, it's
And we
in,
talked about, okay, I'll wait till we're there. Sorry.
So,
I just me personally, we just keep hearing it, we need the people, and that's our services that we provide to the citizens, right?
right,
And we want them to feel safe, and that's what they keep asking, that's what they want. Water, obviously, sewer, but fire and police. And, we keep hearing from the people, so if we just keep staying behind, we're always gonna be behind. And I know it's money, but we've gotta figure out how to make things work so that the city is safe and our fire ratings or whatever insurance ratings are as good as they can be. I don't know.
well, so we wanted to do this, and then we wanted to take direction on where you all wanted to go from here. I wanted to show you kind of
Okay,
where we could get to inside of the existing parameters, and then get a little guidance on what your all's reaction would be to this. Whether or not you thought this was adequate for right now. Certainly adding another fire recruit is something you could do in January if you wanted to. We only have one slot in the academy for August right now. So really, funding two wouldn't do any good because you could only get one in there.
but if you could
If you
fit it
could hire a
in,
lateral, certainly that's something you could do, but the purpose of our first pass through it was just to see if we could get those three positions back and to see if we could maintain balance, right? So we got to what we felt like was an appropriate, I'm not real comfortable increasing the revenue projection above that number, right? I feel like that's about as much as you can go on revenue. And I do think that decreases the conservative nature that we've had, that reduces that. Then on the expense side, that's not a shoestring budget, but I mean, it's covering our operations, based on where we're ending up this year, right? And so then getting to the 225, then this is how that first 225 would go in our minds. So this is what we're proposing you do with that first $225,000 number. So we do think we can get the two positions back in the police and at least one in fire and handle the administrative changes, Donna. You're right, I didn't list that, but what my question was to HR was, what's the total cost of the administrative changes? It was less than 15,000 when he went through all the departments. And so we need to be able to eat that inside of that employee turnover. So I didn't list the police, but that is included,
okay.
yeah. So then, where do we go from here? So now you got a balanced budget with a $5,000 surplus. We know we still got this outlying firefighter, we're gonna hold that, and then we're gonna get into our capital discussion a little bit. So I went back through the capital, and the bottom half of this slide is really, what the capital handout, and there's she's did a nice job with just a simple handout that has all the capital listed on it. The, general fund capital was about one point, what did those numbers add up to?
So your total general fund capital is 8.18 million.
Yeah.
So part of that comes from some bigger projects that had been talked about, potential projects like the police station renovation, the Boffman Avenue project, the North Steers Lane extension. So we kind of categorize those into two groups of will require some additional funding from outside sources like grants or debt versus items that we think are potentially funded from our fund balance. And that section includes a fire truck that we do have ordered. It's been committed to. It's scheduled to be delivered sometime in the fall of $841,000. And then the rest of that is about $839,000 for a total of $2.5 million, which is made up of your additional capital items necessary to do day-to-day work, like your fire turnout gear or 911 equipment or police equipment, IT equipment, that kind of thing. So in total, that 800 from the slide, the 841,000 plus for the fire truck, plus the remainder of those we tried to highlight the ones that would require debt service. So the ones that are not highlighted on this sheet, total up to your 839. And then in addition on the slide, it's not a capital request, but from your reserves, some other requests that had come in through various sources, your senior citizens and your homelessness, to 1.7 million.
Yeah, so when you're talking about your fund balance, then, going back to the top of the slide, your fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, currently how the proposed budget is. So with these numbers included, your fund balance is projected to be $7,365,000. Our existing policy says that we're to hold 25% of our operating revenues and operating plus debt service, right? So that means that number's $5,502,000. So that leaves you available resources to fund capital or one-time expenditures such as capital of about $1,862,000. These are some of the things that were not funded yet, these two up here. And then these were the things that, this has been ordered, expected to come in this year, so we know we gotta fund this. And then these are the balance of the request from the department heads in their capital program, right? So what we did was, for discussion's sake only, we're not necessarily locking these things in. You all tell us what to do, right? So we took the homeless, we said, what if we just put $40,000 for a one-year homeless contribution? And in that year, I think it's important on the homelessness discussion, if you do that, you gotta figure out something sustainable. The city and county can't be funding every program like that out of the same pot of money you're funding police and fire with. That's not a sustainable practice. So you gotta come up with something that works. I've heard it recommended to me about the tax rate of the health department is that, when you're looking at community buy-in, if the city and county endorses the embedding of that expense in that tax rate, then that's ultimately the community support. and it has the same value to the community as if the city, you know, endorsed it in some other way, right? So that's a discussion you need to have for the next 12 months, so that you're not ending up in the situation next year wanting, quote, money for the homeless initiative. If you need a case manager, that's a long-term expense. Figure out a way to pay for that long-term, that's a reoccurring revenue, and fund it and move forward, right? If that's what you want to do. The Senior Citizen Center, we'd seen a lot of, some folks have said that they'd like to see that funded. I don't know, that's up to you all. So we tried to come up with a way to fund it. That was a capital project. We've done that one year for the animal shelter, for example. We did that for BCTC when they were looking to expand. So it's really in that vein that we've categorized this as a lump sum contribution 1 year. Then you got the fire truck and the capital, that totals 1.77 million. And that leaves you an unallocated reserve of $92,000. So you don't necessarily have to lower the fund balance to pay for the capital that's being proposed. There's some room left on that. I think given that you're looking at the park still, there's some discussion left on that. It's not necessarily, would not be our recommendation to budget for things on speculation, right? If you're going to do a project, get your project expense in and then amend your budget to include that exact expense. Don't try to include a round number, because that's going to back you in a corner and do something that you don't necessarily know you're doing. So my advice on the parks would be to flush out any joint agreements that you have on funding, flush out what your actual project scope is, and then develop your budget around that. I think there's a lot of direction that staff has gotten, but there's still some questions, like on the Bunny Davis Center. What does that look like? What's the cost of that? Do you have a partnership? What's the county wanting to do? I just think we need to develop that conversation and develop those agreements further before you include numbers in your budget. Does it make sense?
Right. I don't disagree with that. Personally, if we want to get the ball rolling, say on the pickleball complex or whatever, should we budget some for the planning stage, you know, the design stage and all that, or just do what you're saying and do it as we need to, or?
I think we're already planning that.
Okay.
And I think you'll know quite a bit between now and, but see, you really need to meet with the county. And again, and you need to be able to go through those processes. So yeah, city engineering, we have those contracts. We're still managing that, and we're still going to develop those ideas. But we need to have a couple iterations with the county and trying to figure out what role they want to play. There's other potential partners too that we want to flush all the way to out. And I just don't think, it takes time to do those things.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, okay.
And I just don't want to rush that just to adhere to our schedule on the budget. I think
Right.
you can adopt a budget and still do those things.
Okay. My other question or comment, I guess, is if we lowered the fund balance requirement, which freed up additional funds, would that change any of our allocations to the community agencies? I don't know the answer to that, but.
I mean, I think in that instance, you would be funding a one-time allocation. Because
Okay.
in general, right, you don't want to use that source. You want those reoccurring items to come from that reoccurring revenue, right?
Okay. That makes
So
sense.
I think that you could adjust that, but I think it would be a one time, because if you spend your fund balance down, you might not get it, build it back the next year. So that's kind of the drawback to that.
Yeah,
So it's possible.
how I have always been exposed to it, is that your money above your reserve is for capital, essentially. It's a one-time lump sum that goes into capital, towards capital. It's your depreciation expense, right? To offset your depreciation expenses. Operations pay for operations, so your reoccurring operating revenue, that's the limit of what you can, if it's a known reoccurring expense, it is not necessarily wise to budget your reoccurring expenses in excess of your reoccurring revenue.
Understand?
Right.
Makes sense, yeah.
But for an
So-
example, though, getting back to Kevin's comment, if we took the targeted fund balance from 25% down to 20%, that would generate
So, yes.
say, another $1 million for one-time expenditure.
It does. And so if you pull your fund balance down to 20%, it means that 5.5 turns into 4.4, and it frees up $1,100,590, basically.
I'm
So-
not saying we're gonna do that, but it's just, I think that's what he's getting at, is what it
Yes,
looks like.
yeah, yeah.
But then
So-
Leah's comment is that if you do that, that money had better be spent on things that you're gonna spend them for one time.
Yes.
And move
Yeah.
on,
So,
So what you're after?
So Kevin, what exactly that number is important. So you've got $1 million. If you adjust your target fund balance down, you've got $1 million you can dedicate towards capital. Offset of your expenses in your parks, offset in expenses in City Hall Police Station.
Right.
We know that needs renovated. We know that needs upgraded. My suggestion is, before you do any reaction to your fund balance at all, let's get to what that detailed design finally looks like. Let's get that settled. Let's see what that projected cost is in the next 4 months, probably. And then make some decisions from that more informed standpoint. So when we go through, so this question of the fund balance was a hot topic this year amongst cities. And so on the listserv, we did see the city managers and city administrators and mayors ask the question, what is your policy on fund balance, right? And so we've seen, Lee tried to investigate it. She found some. So we've seen what all these other cities, including Danville, responded with. Ours is 25% currently. The GFO says it needs to be 2 to 3 months of expenses, which is somewhere between 20 and 25%, frankly. And so going below 20% would not be advised
No, I wouldn't.
at all,
I wouldn't want
even a percent. Now, saying that, if you lowered it from 25 to 24, you're gonna free up about $220,000, plus or minus.
Okay.
So, at some point, that discussion can be had. If you wanted to fund the fire position, Donna, you would need to lower probably your. Yeah, I don't know how you would do that necessarily and comply.
For the fire position, I think you probably need to look at cutting other expenses, like operating or non-capital expenses.
I would say this, let's do it like this. Let's get towards December and see how we're trending on revenue for the fiscal year, and see where, if we're coming in, if we start trending towards that 10.7 number again, then let's have that discussion in December, Donna, if we can. Because if we hire a recruit in August, they're gonna be gone. We're not gonna we would have to hire a lateral.
I'm saying for the commission as a whole asked that question at the last meeting, not just me.
Correct.
So I think everybody that's what they wanted. I had some questions on the capital, like the fire truck. That was projected, you all ordered it way back in 22, before we were here.
Correct.
So did you have money in the budget already set aside for that, since you knew it was coming?
So you still have to budget for it in the current year.
Right.
But there's no like funds
Was
held.
it set back held for that?
Yes.
There wasn't any?
There was not.
It was always in our fund balance. We,
So it's a fund balance.
So you knew it was
expense.
there?
Correct,
Yeah, we
right.
knew we had to spend that
Right.
because you ordered it in '22, I think.
correct,
And then me personally, I mean, like on the parks, I think the sooner the better, we need a meeting again, because if we don't meet, I mean, I would like to see us move forward instead of just talk about a lot of stuff. I know we're doing a lot, you're all doing a ton of work. I would just like to keep moving, and on the police station, I would like to see the numbers. I don't know how long it takes. I thought they might have completed that so that we could see it and sort of move forward, sooner than,
Yeah,
3
as
years
soon
from
as,
now.
as soon as we get through it, we'll bring it forward. Yeah.
and on the park, I mean, I would like, obviously, I guess we would all talk about it before just the things on the list were put in, or, in the capital. I mean, the decisions would have to be made of where to put things. Like the pool or the splash pads that are on there, or.
Yes.
Those are the things we're talking
decisions-
about.
Yeah, all those are to come.
Right.
Yeah.
Seems like to me too, thank you for setting that up, Commissioner Peak. If we feel real good about we're going to go forward and expand pickleball and take a hard look at that internal, or that, space for Parks and Rec. We're just waiting for some numbers to come in and some collaborations to come together. I understand that. And maybe don't want to put in a budget, face it when we can see it. But I also think what Commissioner Peak brought up is that even with the budget, we feel like if we expand pickleball, that we really need that third splash pad right now, and maybe that shouldn't even be there to start freeing up some of your money so that we can feel real comfortable about adding police, fire, and 9/11 didn't get addressed, and I'm hoping we're kind of thinking about them too, because it seems like they could at least use one more person. But I guess I'm saying, if we really don't think we're going to need some of this stuff, let's just not even put it in the budget.
Yeah, so the items down there, like the splash pad and those, so the highlighted items in the parks are not necessarily budgeted yet,
Okay.
right? That would be when you make your final decision on, you may not do that splash pad this year, for example. Josh put that in there to show you, so ultimately, that will be a conversation on how to handle that
Okay.
over the next few months.
Okay.
Whether or not you do anything tied to that, whether you just focus on your pool, your pickleball area, and your indoor gym space. I mean, you could just strictly focus on that.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Right.
I guess I didn't pay attention to the highlight of blue, and that I was kind of a maybe. And actually, just about everything there is kind of a maybe, and that's all right, because I think there's priorities that should exist.
Yeah, so on that sheet, for example, what makes up the 839 number, replacement, starting at the top, the 911, is replacement of the CAD PCs, 18,005, replacement of the 911 servers, 10, replacement of the backup battery system is 10, fire engine 19 is 841, which is on the screen above that. The turnout gear, we're purchasing $25,000 worth of turnout gear. You're doing minor renovations at the south end station of $50,000. Skipping on down, you're doing the firing range at $75,000. You're putting $75,000 in the gun range that we talked about. So the items that are not highlighted are the items that you funded out of the general fund specifically.
Oh, that makes, okay.
So the non-highlighted items total 839. And that includes a dump truck for Public Works. That includes the welcome signs, $200,000 for the welcome signs that we've talked about. Some of the bigger items is really conversations to be had.
Well, just took care of my question, that was, yeah, 'cause I said, in all that budget, we're not getting anything, but we are, all the non-blue items are being funded in this year's current budget.
Correct, and
Yeah.
in that eight, and make up that 839 number, I didn't say that very clear the first time. But,
And then,
go ahead.
then the green, the blue, and the,
So utility fund is kind of its own little realm, right? Where some of the debt service is related to KIA loans, some of it's the
Yeah.
bond issuance that we've had already, or the bond anticipation note that's ongoing. So that is kind of in its own little, silo,
they could be
you
paid
will.
with other fundings,
yes.
yeah.
So let's talk about the utility real quick.
So,
going
Earl,
to-
on the 8 million, sorry, it covers everything pretty much that the department heads asked for, that they presented to us 2 weeks ago.
Two
In
things.
capital.
Two things I cut out was
Okay.
the mini excavator and the drone for the police.
Okay.
I was trying to just make everything balance. If, that's the only two items that we pulled out, the mini excavator for the public works and the drone that the police department wanted.
And how much were those?
The drone was 25,000 and the mini excavator was 58, 78, I'm sorry. They were it was a total of $103,000 that we cut out of the capital.
Yeah, see, that says a whole lot right there, see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the capital request, sans those two things are, it's in there.
Okay.
So on page 28 of your detail sheets, if y'all take a second and just come to that, I want to show you, I had, in passing, I had talked to Commissioner Caudle, and I had told him I felt like the utility may need to do a 1% rate increase above the COLA this year. And I don't have a slide for this. On the very bottom of page 28 is the water plant. The bottom line is personnel, but I want to focus on the second line from the bottom of page 28. If you go back to the right-hand columns of actual 2020 and actual 21, that was pre-COVID. That was 2.1 million to operate the plant and 2.3 million to operate the plant. Once we got through COVID and hit that inflation, can you see how the actual 22 and actual 23 numbers jumped? So the actual 22 and 23, it went to 2.7 and 2.8 on the water plant. Say this real quick. When Connie did when I was talking to you about that, Kevin, I was worried about whether or not the last rate study we did, and we're due this year, we're trying to get on Connie's schedule, she's full. But the last rate study we did was right before COVID hit, right? So our rate base was to cover the expenses, the wastewater plant, payroll change, and, the sewer project like on Lebanon Road, the water project on Perryville Road. Those things were included in our last rate study. And we knew what those expenses were because they were bid projects. And so we've been waiting to those finished before we really got her back in. Those are all wrapping up. So it's definitely time for her to come back in and do a proof test on that rate. We were able to get to a balanced rate, a balanced budget on the utility with just the 3.4% increase this year, the COLA, that is built into the rate or built into the ordinance. But I want you to understand, I want to caution everybody that the impact of inflation is biggest felt in the utility side. And you can see it in this department almost entirely, right? Like you can really see that jump. That inflationary impact was not predicted when she did her last rate study, which is why I was concerned about it, Kevin, when you and I were talking where we were at.
Yeah.
We got to a balanced budget without doing that, but I just want to highlight that and point out the impact on operations on the utility side, that inflationary impact on operations on the utility side. It is dramatic, right?
And not coming down.
And I can't imagine it coming down. Like some of those things are cooked in with the chemicals and things, and it's just, it's gonna be tricky. So fortunately, we had just done the rate study. Fortunately, we had just done the rate impact and considered all those expenses. And so we've been able to get by. We've had new revenue coming in from one of the wholesale districts because of the water line. We've picked up a little bit of revenue from North Mercer. We're picking up, in the fiscal year we're going in, the new revenue from Springfield. So you're going to get a little bit, so it's those subtle changes and the rate increase has enabled us to kind of eat that inflation to date, but it's real close, real close.
So do we have to wait for her go ahead before we raise the rate? Is that-
No, you don't have to wait for it. I like to get that third-party opinion to make sure so what we're going to be doing over the next 6 months is, we've transitioned our software. We've transitioned all the meters. So we have to really get into our account and make sure, or our computer system, and audit the application of our rate charge to those accounts and make sure they're cubic foot or gallons, or we want to ensure that the right rate code is on the right accounts, is on the right meters. We've got to go through that audit over the next few months. You know, the fire protection fee, all of those things. Our wholesale customers are generally easy, but the industrial rate base, we want to go through all of that data so that when Connie gets freed up in December, her work will be half done. But it's just the right time to do that because all these projects are finishing up. And before we start the next round of projects in full, the ARPA money, the Perryville Junction City work, which you'll have that engineering contract for those projects. I don't know, is it on there Monday? Or it's on the 2 weeks? It's 2 weeks. I've talked to Marshall, it's 2 weeks from now. Yeah, those will be back. So there's going to be a lot of new activity pickup for the utility this summer that is different than the projects you've been seeing. But it does create, this fiscal year does create a defined point that we can go back and do our rate analysis from.
No. I always feel like I'm being critical, and I don't mean for it to come out that way at all. I appreciate, until Lee was here, I didn't really even know what I was looking at. It looked like pig Swahili or something. So,
Well,
I know enough to ask a question now because of the way it's presented. But I appreciate all the work that goes into it. I just have questions for myself.
there's a lot of pages, and it's really hard to present. And I don't want to just put a bunch of words up there that look like this. I want you to look at the detail for sure, but it's very difficult to present the detail and go through every line. That's just a hard thing, but I want to make sure, so you all do have every line, you have that. And I just want to make sure, sometimes we struggle to communicate because it's just, we want you to know everything, but we don't want to overwhelm your ability to see it in the moment either.
Yeah.
So that said, in summary.
Especially Donna, because she's just always about a step slow, and you got to make up for it.
So let me
I'll take up for you, Don.
summarize again, and I think Lee did a good job assembling these slides in a simple way that we can understand it. So here's where we're at with our draft budget. We have a draft revenue of 22,382. We will have a draft expense of 22,377 when we roll these personnel changes into that proposed budget, okay?
Say that last number is 23 what?
So you're gonna have 22,382 and an expense of 22,377.
That's the new number, okay.
Yeah. Now, we are not recommending adjusting the fund balance today. What we are suggesting is that we fund those things with the existing fund balance. That leaves you about $92,000 of fund balance that's unallocated. We're going to continue to flush out our projects. That conversation will continue through the fall. We're going to continue now through the summer with conversations with the county on the parks and the Parks Committee and continue that work so that we get to a point where we go forward with a decision that makes sense for everybody. And so now the utility fund is balanced. That's in your packet. We can let that just sit. My thought was is let that information sit with you for a week. Come back at the next budget meeting and just literally pull the information up and say, what's your questions, what's your direction? We do want to add that other fire position. We want to add another police position too. Let's get through the fiscal year some. Let's get into January, December, kind of see how revenue's trending to make sure we're going to hit our targets and then react to that. If we're coming in good, then maybe we'll have a conversation about amending the budget to add those two positions.
Let me ask my question. I've been sort of letting everybody ask their question. I have a question about operating expenses for legislative and executive at 1.6.
Yes, sir.
Explain to us what's included in that.
That is your city hall non-finance. So HR, engineering, city manager's office, city clerk, community, that's city hall's operation, excluding finance and utility.
Could you put, well, if the question was asked, you could pull out of that travel and training and expenses like that for that department, those departments, I should say.
So all the travel and training is typically recorded in either your conference and meetings lines, which is down toward the bottom on 10, 13, 10, 71, 42, your staff development and education, sometimes that's your training classes, on 10, 13, 71, 41. In total, you've only budgeted about 28,000 for everybody in that department, which includes city manager, city clerk, city engineer, your HR director, and then all of the staff associated, plus any trainings that the commission attends.
So that's KLC conference, that's, all of those are funded through that line item.
I was just trying to go on a fishing expedition to try to find $90,000, but that's not the right place to find it.
If you can find it, we'll take it.
No, what I mean is that we have to lower something that we anticipated spending.
Absolutely.
Because it's reoccurring expenditures, and then we could possibly stick in that second firefighter position, but if we waited till January to do it, it would be half of the 93.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Earl, I probably missed it, you probably covered it, but the gathering place, capital project?
Yeah, that's
Is
the
that-
senior citizen. That's the
Where am I missing that?
$50,000 request.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Got you.
And was it a $50,000 request?
It was, yeah, right at 50.
Right at 50,000?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, one time, right? Okay.
Yep. Actually, I think he was like 52,000 and change. We'll put the precise number in there, but.
Sure. Well,
but-
and the other question with that was that's a baseline number for us, but was he asking that of the city and the county? 50,000
Yes.
each?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, okay.
Yeah,
'Cause I was saying, if he was asking just for 50, okay.
yeah.
I can't find it, I'll keep looking, but, okay, let's go back to my other question then. If we went from the 25% fund balance and considered going to 20%, whatever, that 1.1 million, then we could ask you guys to suggest some other things to punch off of this list? Or you could ask us for other things to punch off of this list? Because it'd be one time,
I mean, you could, you would get a partial, so Boffman Avenue is one that Josh has, it's mostly grant funded. So that one is kind of a net, it's kind of taken care of in itself. Your North Stewart's Lane, which is, got a lot of grant funds for it as well. So really, you would be looking at the match for part of those. And then I think $1 million isn't gonna cover your police station renovation. It's in really
gonna
bad
cover what
shape.
now?
It's $1 million won't cover your PD renovation.
No, yeah. Yeah, no, I would-
So they could come up with more things.
No, I want to come up with more things. We've got a good list right here. It just would be nice to punch some of these things off of this list. For example, the Michael Smith Park Pavilion, $500,000. That must be a heck of a pavilion.
Yeah, I would wanna talk about that.
But just as an example,
Yeah,
could we get it for $250,000 if we did it, real quick? But again, I don't know. It's just like, that just seems like, some of these prices are, I know they built up because of inflation, but man.
So yes, if you adjusted your fund balance throughout the year lower to that 20% and got $1 million or close to it, you could self-fund some of those other parks projects that you guys have been
Yeah.
introduced to.
Josh, how much was the committal shelter? 400, for one committal shelter? And the pavilion would be a little bit more larger than that. So that was some of the basis for those numbers.
And that doesn't have 4 walls in it. Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
And I think we could explore, that's, if we wanted to set some firm budget numbers, and send us down that road, we could try some different things.
I asked the question because it's just amazing that we have this list of projects and we'd like to do a bunch of them overnight, but financially we can't because
So-
the last 5 years, the prices just skyrocketed.
They
We first
have.
started talking about the shelters, it was like 100,000.
So rather than pulling that down, what we would advise is to get those numbers, to make decisions on really what you want to spend money on in total. And then it's possible you roll a shelter into a debt service for the pool, if that's what you want to do, and save your reserve.
Yeah.
So I think I would just caution you to make those decisions later on.
Sure.
When you have the actual numbers in front of you.
Yeah.
That, and really pick off your shopping cart what you want to finance. And then make a decision with what you want your fund balance to be. You'll have more information than when you do.
Well, and my conversation is just, there are gonna be a lot of folks who are gonna watch these broadcasts.
Yeah.
And they need to know we're taking this stuff very seriously, and we're trying to get down to the line item possibilities, and you all are giving us good information. Sometimes you give us too much, sometimes we feel like we don't get enough, but we've got to struggle our way through it, and we're doing just that. And it's tough. For example, one of my real biggies that I know is not in this budget, at least I don't think it's in there, is that a lobbyist, I'll toss that out again. We've talked about that several times as a commissioner, but we're still trying to do that type of work without setting aside $100,000 a year for a person to do just that for us. So I hope folks will appreciate the effort that is going into this work. And you got the 40,000 up there for the homeless thing, because that's the first time it's been a line item thing in our budget, but it's there now. And I know Earl always reminds us that all those community agencies, that's still addressing that same issue. So people need to understand that.
On the homeless, on that particular item, just pull that out. Me personally, I think others would too, I would want to see a plan. There's nothing in stone anywhere about it, right? That I know of currently.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
And I just wouldn't want to, I would like to have a plan to know what you're funding before we're funding. It's sort of like before we're spending money on the police station, we got to have a plan of what we're doing. Same things there, in my
Totally
opinion.
reasonable, yeah.
Well, and to answer her question, I went to the homeless task force meeting, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, been so many meetings this week. And they were saying exactly that. So they are beginning to put together a list of items that might become part of a plan. They're working on a plan. They have been to Northern Kentucky, which they had a presentation Tuesday night. It just blew me away because it was over almost $1.5 million in Covington. Then they had the Garrett County one. They looked at 3 different ones that were already in existence. And it's just amazing what some communities are doing. And so they're working, that task force, and they're wanting input from all of us in the community to help reach that. And their biggest question is, we have to justify trying to say we need a shelter, that we might be able to take care of the issue without actually building a shelter someplace, but who knows?
I mean, I think it's a community effort, not just, like you've said, it's not a city-county problem, it's everybody's problem.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
So there's
Yeah.
gotta be money
Yeah.
from other sources, not just
Yes.
us, because
Yes.
our money is super important to what we provide
Yes.
for the city.
What
you
the
know?
city's required to provide,
That's what
yeah.
we're required
Same thing
to
for the
do.
county. I mean, the
Yeah,
county's
same
got to
thing
deal
as
with
the county.
the heavy infrastructure that's attributed to them. And so it's hard for the county and the city to add things that it's not really set up to do.
And it's really amazing, just that one meeting, for them to talk about the agencies that they are continuing to identify that are helping with this issue.
Yeah.
And what they're doing. You know, it's like, wow. But again, we need to have some money in the budget, which I appreciate that, because if something comes down the pike and they need some money, we've got a little bit set there to help get things started with the community. Other questions or comments to this group?
So Donna, let me say that real quick. If you all ultimately pass this, we will acknowledge that we're not going to allocate $40,000 to just anybody until there's a program, and we will ask you all at the time of that
Yes,
disbursement that that's the path you all want to go down.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
we will include that $40,000 in the budget,
Yeah.
and that will be held until such time you all tell us that this is the program you all want to fund.
Same thing about the senior citizens request.
Yeah.
And so they've got a project, so they raise enough funds and show us that they're breaking ground and it's underway. They have to come in and request the funds.
Correct.
It's there, but they have to
Yep.
request them, so.
No, I appreciate all the work you've done on the budget. I know it's hard, there's a lot, everybody wants money, and that money's earmarked, but not necessarily, doesn't go there until it goes there, so I understand that. Yeah.
Could we talk about the funding of the development corp real quick? I guess the request was for $250, and we're not quite at that level. I just wanted to see what everybody was thinking on that one, or?
It was, going to, page 11 in your detail. That 7920 line, it's highlighted 100. That is the number that we had been funded until this past fiscal year, which it was increased to 150. And the bulk of that 50 was designed to go towards the website development. The idea of a housing project, the idea of those things are all credible. But we don't want to, in the same way we're talking about the police station, you know, we don't want to obligate your operating revenue against some idea if you really don't know the scope and definition of that, right? In addition to that, projects of the city and county that require infrastructure are supposed to go to the EDA under state law, right? Like your state law is the place where the city and county invest in that infrastructure. The Development Corporation is the place where you're developing programming, right? So I think some of that cost is ultimately going to be borne by the EDA, administered by the Development Corporation. And I think that we need to verify what our idea actually is and then where that funding's gonna come from. The EDA has the ability to do debt service. It has it short-term, so if you're gonna buy property for land, the city and county don't necessarily need to fund that. The EDA can borrow the money for it if the city and county, if the EDA has the money to provide the debt service until such time that that property is flipped. Then the money comes back and the debt service is paid off because you're getting rid of it. So there's a lot of different ways that can go that don't necessarily require large and small investment necessarily, some small, but, you know, particularly when it comes to housing, we need to make sure what that program looks like. You know, it needs to have some definition to it. And so we did put $100,000 in there for that, which funded them at the previous year's level, basically. But understanding that there's gonna be additional need for money, and as those programs' ideas are all the way flushed out. And so for the city, it's easier to adapt those into the city's operations at the time that they come out. And so they're, you know, preemptively budgeting for things that you don't know what they actually are gonna cost. If you're gonna have money in reserve, if it's under that, so if you're gonna budget $100,000 for a program and it comes in at $80,000, the reserve needs to sit with the city, not necessarily given to a third party to hold, right? So if we have a program that costs $80,000, then the city needs to fund $80,000. They're part of $80,000, right? But like I said, infrastructure theoretically is supposed to go through the EDA. And so we need to talk about that and make sure we're aligned with those categories correctly.
So just in a nutshell, if something big
We-
came down the pike, we would consider that, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
right there's $92,000 you can put towards something.
Or more.
Or more if you drop
Lower.
your, right.
And we can lower the fund, or the 25%
Yeah.
anytime during the year.
Exactly. And then you can lower that and
And you
then.
can adjust it back if you want to. I mean, that's
Absolutely.
the whole thing, you can.
Right. The city has that flexibility and that's, knowing that flexibility exists is, for me, that makes the city's budget pretty straightforward. We fund operations and then we go forward.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I got a couple of questions. It's kind of nice to look at the monies that we'd free up if we go to 20% target or fund balance versus 25. But you're not showing any monies that are a result of increases. Alcohol tax is one we just did, and it may be minor, but we're not seeing it.
So it's the increase that you all had verbally agreed to for alcohol is budgeted in here.
It's in
Okay.
your revenue
It's in
projections.
your projection.
Yeah.
Okay, my other one, I'm still a little conflicted, and I apologize for that, but, you know, what was brought up was money set aside for the homeless, but not really anything specific. Let's wait and see. And so back to Parks and Rec, which seems to be my thing. I just don't feel good about pickleball or indoor facility not being there. Whether we can put money on it or not, is there some way we can say we're going to fund that, hopefully?
Yes, so the consultant is working on what that plan looks like. We'll bring that back in the next month or so to start the conversation with you all.
Yeah.
You are going to steer that conversation. If you have a $40,000 project to do pickleball, then you'll approve that, and then
Okay.
we'll fund it.
So-
If it's $1 million project for pickleball, you all will tell us that, and then we'll go forward
Okay.
with
So basically, you're saying what we're looking at is not going to be the final product there is in that particular department and others, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. In that particular department particularly. The three things, the two big things is Parks and Rec. They have a lot of capital that's big ticket items, and the police station. Those two things are not funded necessarily. But we want to get to more precise information before we bring that to you to fund.
And I think this list for Park and Rec was just Josh's interpretation of the last meeting of what the overwhelming consensus was from both sides. It's not the exhaustive list. I think if he gave you that, it'd be closer to 15 million, 200. Yeah, so I think pickleball was just one that he did not
Yeah.
get on there.
And this list, this list was generated before the new proposal was brought forth too, wasn't it? I think
What's
it was.
that?
It was
Do what now? Yeah,
not for 25. I think it's on 26.
I had it 26, but I had it after the full project.
Yeah. So this is just your current year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
That's the same thing for Eagle Rec, because Eagle Rec was looking for like FY 26, before we spend the money.
Well, I just want, I guess my question is, that I want that to be included because I think that, again, if we feel pretty serious about it, and this is the fiscal court, city commission, and the advisory board, we ought to have that listed. And some of these other things probably won't happen this year, and that's just the way life is.
yeah. Yeah, we anticipate there being a joint Parks and Rec meeting where all of these items that are highlighted, including pickleball, are discussed and you all ultimately prioritize for staff. And jointly, like the city and county, prioritize those things for staff. With,
That meeting, can we request that? You know, I know we had the last meeting, we sort of just, you know, we all just sort of dance around the questions, I think. I mean, can we just sort of say, our goal for this meeting is to, what will you fund?
Yes.
Or what will we fund? And where can we move forward instead of just like, well, we're gonna meet in another month? You know, it would be nice to have a path forward for maybe them to commit and us to commit, and that way we can move forward.
yeah, great. We will be very direct with that next time. Josh and I both, and also Bear Becker, just talked about how we really didn't, but the last meeting, we felt like we really got some direct, believe it or not, we felt like we had a lot of consensus around the projects, which is how Josh developed his list. I felt good about that. So we've been trying to get another meeting scheduled with the county. Budget process is just tough this time of year. We're going to have something scheduled, and then we'll follow up, and that will be the purpose of the next meeting, is to say, look, this is what we heard. Is this right or wrong? And how much of this are y'all wanting us to really flush all the way down?
I went to my first Parks and Rec meeting this week also. First time in several years, but good meeting though. Good interaction among all the members. Yeah. So people are working for us. I just got to hit that lotto so I can, somebody buy me that first ticket so I can finance a bunch of this stuff. Oh, that's off the record right there. Well, again, I'm like Mr. P. I think we can see, it's very obvious that there's been a lot of work, a lot of thought, a lot of departmental interactions with these things, and we're trying to move forward. I was sitting there, and then as you went down the list, I started checking things off. These things will be gone because they're one-time expenditures. We have to maintain them, but they're one-time expenditures, so that's good. But we got to get some of these blue things checked off. Man.
Yeah, it's going to be a big decision year, I feel like, with parks especially.
Well, and we talk about bonding stuff, you know, some of these things might get knocked off that list by us deciding to let Leah go out there and finance them someplace for us, right?
Yeah, like the pool requires a little bit of, any one of those projects with whatever we're doing requires some pro forma analysis. They're revenue tied to all of them. For example, pickleball, if, you know, and Mr. Carter, we appreciate his attendance because we know it's important to the group that he's with. But if you do a portion of an indoor space for pickleball, you need to probably have a gate fee every time someone goes in. in the same way you would charge someone to go into a rec center to play racquetball, you're gonna have to pay something. And so it's same thing for a new pool. So if you have a new pool, your demand's probably gonna be higher, your population density is gonna be higher. You're talking about potentially year-round expenditure. So that you're gonna have a new pro forma for all of those things, which is why we really wanna make sure that before we get into trying to sort through all of those things, we wanna make sure that's the direction you all want us to go. And then, the same thing for the indoor expansion. If you can do an indoor rec center with a partner, you're gonna end up with a totally different cost. Then what do you do with features at Bunny Davis? How do you figure out what's not done in the community? What can you do? What services can you provide that are not provided? And can Bunny Davis be the future home of those? I don't know that answer. But those are the questions that we've got to ask each other as we finalize these concepts and ideas.
Yeah, wouldn't it be amazing if you had a year-round aquatic center and a year-round, I don't say pickleball, but pickleball gym and a whole lot of things that are enclosed and for year-round services. Wow. But I think the people who are pushing these things to us as projects, I think they understand the financial investment that we're going to have to make and they're going to have to make as well. I feel good about that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not asking us to do something for free.
No, that's not our perception at all. None of the categories that are big expenses, I think everyone is expecting right now that those are, gate fee type situations. The pool already is, but that's going to be expanded. Pickleball would. I know Jerry's back there nodding his head, and I think indoor rec of all kinds would be a pay as you play kind of situation, I think. And most communities are.
Yeah.
Most communities are.
And our favorite word is parking has to come along with all of these items too, so.
Yeah.
Well, but it's an exciting time though, to have people talking about doing some of these types of projects in Danville. Other questions or comments?
Did you look at, just at, in the utility fund, did you look at adding an overhire, maybe possibly for a water plant if people were, because we had said that too? Just because so many people can retire, that you're ready, it takes so long to get them in there?
Yeah, we're looking at that still.
Which is a different fund, that's not your general fund. so-
No, we're looking at how to do that still.
Okay.
You're going to lose a couple quicker, and so you can fund a lot just with those two positions. Because
Right.
theoretically, you overhired one at the water plant a couple of years ago. So, it may be that you just take those salaries and dedicate it to trainees, that kind of thing. So we'll see how that plays out. Like I said, and then two, by the time you get to December, you're going to hear Connie's presentation. And so we can really, by then, get into how you're going to turn over the utility workforce over the next 3 years. And then you can program that into your rate too. So I think you've got a lot of opportunity to manage that with on the utility side that you don't on the general fund side. And there's no time restriction on the utility. So when you want to do the rate change, you can do it to accommodate those recommended changes. The only time that you're going to have a restriction on your utility rate change is with the wholesale rates. Those have to go to the Public Service Commission. But other than that, it's your rate change occurring in January might be a good thing because it's not July 1st with your COLA. You can then keep those two things separated too, so.
I have one more question, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No.
But, I think on our tour, we talked to maybe, the fire marshal maybe.
Yeah.
And I know, Tony, back in the day, there was the police corps, or I think that's what he was saying, more a fire corps, that you can go out, you get grants to hire a police officer, to hire a firefighter. And then year 4, you would just have to be committed to funding it, and I don't know, I know he said something at the fire that they do that now, and I know police used to, I don't know if they do it anymore. No, police.
I hadn't heard that on the fire side,
Ask,
but
the
but
fire
it-
marshal, the
it
fire
may be a
marshal
fire
mentioned it.
commission grant.
Yeah, it's a
That-
grant.
That's what he's
And
probably
that you
exposed
sort
to.
of, they used to do it in police, right, Tony? I'm just thinking, you know, out of the box that,
Program like that.
right,
With all the new, requirements and the, certifications, things like that, they'll see that training is totally trained. It's
Okay.
totally changed.
okay.
The fire do have something like I think they have something where they can do kind of a recruit type thing, you know, and work them up to a volunteer type.
I don't know.
And get paid somehow too.
He mentioned it that we could that grant would pay for them, and then we would just have to be ready year 4, I believe, to pay for them, or commit to that position. Continue the position.
Okay.
So just ask him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something to look at.
Love it.
That's money.
Free is my favorite word.
Free is good.
Please.
You used to go around taking the prize out of cereal without paying for the cereal, didn't you?
No, but my grandma did have a really bad habit of testing the grapes. in the energy bottle, but
You have to test.
I won't say if I picked that up or not.
That's cute. That's cute. Okay, Commissioner Holland's not gonna make it. I mean, she's getting a lot of awards at the program, but that's good. She's been a mom. Other questions? When is our next budget meeting? Next Thursday, oh, man.
Is that right?
Is that right?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday, okay.
Okay, 8:30,
When's your city
same location?
Commission meeting Tuesday, right? Tuesday.
Commission
Yeah.
meeting Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Budget
yes.
meeting Thursday.
Yeah. Well, I just want to keep going through this process. And I think it's important, commissioners, that you keep studying and crying and reading and asking questions and whatever till we get to where we finalize and everybody feels comfortable about it. And to my commissioner, to my right, no need to apologize for every time you ask a question. That's what we're here for. Ask your
Right.
questions, shoot. You're sitting next to Kevin, so he's rubbing off on you, so that's good. Although you ask good questions. Although you ask good questions, I'm not sure
I'd
about
like to
him.
comment. I
I move
think
we
it's
adjourn.
interesting what we are faced with, and it's certainly all your work, that we have obligations we need to take care of, police, fire, utilities, and yet we weigh it against economic development too, which can help fund it. So it gets to be kind of a tough process probably, and confusing to folks out in the street. I like to use that term, on why you spending so much money on this or that, and I'll just use pickleball again since Jerry's here, but that could turn into tournaments and actually fund itself, so,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's a quality of life thing, there's no doubt, and, you know, people, you know, I go back to we have a sister city close by that I know of multiple families that have moved to because of some recreation activities there. Now, not all of them, I know one family that left Danville to move there, particularly because they had an indoor gym space that was community accessible. So the quality of life stuff does matter.
yes.
And so it's a tough balance. The most confusing part is when you do something like streetscape, for example, folks say, well, why didn't you fund the police and fire? Why didn't you build, you know, that's different. The operating expenses are one thing, the capital is another. That's the hardest thing to get understood, even with staff. Sometimes, you know, it's becomes a different pot of money at the end of each fiscal year. And that's one of the things that we answer a lot. I don't know what comes to you, but that's the question of, well, you're spending all this money. Well, but it no longer is operating money. It's not. It's designed to do your capital at that point. So,
And all those projects, to me, improve quality of life as well.
absolutely
They're
does.
the ones that we don't
Yeah.
think about and see all the time, but they're there, and we use them all the time.
Yep.
So, yeah, it all helps. If we were sitting here today and we're applauding ourselves and says, Dad, we wiped off all the things on the blue list. We were gonna get them done 24, 25. Well, be amazing. And still have that 25% fund balance. Be amazing. We're just not in a position to do that right now. We're working on it, though. And I think you all have given us, you all have done this also. The community needs to understand that you all have taken every suggested item and given it, scrutinized it, you screened it, you put it on a priority list. And we're trying to work our way through everything that the community has brought forth to us. And I think you should be commended for that as well. And just like the police and the fire, to be willing to do A instead of B, or do C instead of A and B, but they think it's what's right for the community, and they should be commended for that. Okay? Any other comments, questions?
Appreciate y'all's work.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Chair would be open for a motion to go into executive session.
You can go by yourself.
I shocked them all. Chair be in a motion for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Yes, sir. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
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 I couldn't say that word, executive.